Batman becomes the Green Lantern in Green Lantern number 9, released in 2005. Now, before we get into the comic, let's go over a couple of things before we get into the story. The first being that this takes place after the Identity Crisis storyline, where Batman's memories are erased after the horrific acts committed by Dr. Light in that storyline. And the reason for that lies in that story. So if you want to know about that, go read it. But the second thing is that this story takes place after Hal Jordan returns as the main Green Lantern of Earth. As within this story, you'll see many references of Hal returning and blood being on his hands. Because before this, Hal was actually the villain known as Parallax. And if you ever read up on that, you would know after Mongul destroyed his hometown Coast City on Earth, he descends into madness and kills all the Guardians. But honestly, it's a lot of plot and not that important right now, because all you really need to know is that Hal was once a villain, redeemed his sins, and is now a Green Lantern again. Which brings us to the opening of Green Lantern number 9, where we're set in Gotham City, as we see a man running away from a tiger with an item in his possession. He manages to jump onto a blimp, exclaiming that he had made it, and while he hangs off the edge, a flying skull comes out of nowhere, making the man let go and falling straight to his death from the sky. And as the skull and tiger approach the man, they turn into mist as if they weren't real at all. And then we see in the very next panel, it was actually the tattooed man's doing all along, with the mist flowing back into his body as he says, "This won't hurt a bit, you're already dead." But this now brings us to the planet of Oa, specifically the central precinct of the Green Lantern Corps, where we see Hal putting in a request for a new personal power battery. Salak tells him that it costs him almost 3 Rotox, which is over 177 million American dollars, to which Hal tells him to take it out of his next paycheck. Salak also tells him that since Hal has been back as a Green Lantern, he's been monitoring his performance, and says even though he's performed his duty as a Green Lantern, they still have to discuss something unpleasant, to which he tells Hal that he's been officially stripped from the label of Renegade by the Guardians since he was able to redeem himself. But he does warn him, however, that what happened when Hal was Parallax will eventually spread among the new 7,200 appointed Green Lanterns, and tells him that the next time he's in Oa, he should really watch his back, to which Hal responds that watching his back isn't new to him, which takes us straight back to Gotham City, in specific the Batcave, where we see Batman about to respond to the bat signal. But before he can leave, Green Lantern shows up and says he should really work with the light on, it could ruin his eyes. He tells Batman that Green Arrow said he wanted to see him and that he could have called him himself. Batman says that all these numbers on speed dial still, and right as Hal asks how Alfred's been, Batman cuts him off and gets straight to business as he tells him that yesterday witnesses said Lou Rosen was chased through the streets of Gotham City by a saber-toothed tiger and tried to escape by hopping onto a blimp, but a flying skull with bat wings knocked him off. And when they recovered the body, he had the phrase "weakness women" tattooed on his chest. And when Hal asks him why write that on his chest, Batman reveals that Rosen was having an affair with an assistant. Hal initially thinks it was his wife who could have done it, but Batman immediately shuts down that theory by saying that Rosen was an accountant for Tobias Whale, and Rosen was about to turn state's evidence, so there was a price on his head, and the tattooing on his body is the hitman's MO, to which Batman reveals to Hal that the killer is the tattooed man. But Hal is very confused by this because Tattooed Man, the real Tattooed Man that he usually deals with, is locked up at Blackgate, as he's been trying to go on a straight path for as long as he can remember, with of course a few slip-ups here and there. But in true Batman fashion, this man knows this guy's whole background and reveals that his name is Mark Richards, a former US Marine who apparently went missing after his helicopter crashed during the subsonic wars in southern Modora 3 years ago. The bodies of his fellow soldiers were found but were marked in tribal tattoos. But Richards, on the other hand, was never recovered and was presumed to be dead until last month when his fingerprints were found at a crime scene, and no one knows how he got like this and why. Batman tells Hal that he wants him out of Gotham and that he's tracked him to the Cityside Motel. Hal suggests that they try to catch him together, to which Batman declines, saying that he has other things to do, referring to Hal by his last name. Green Lantern picks up on this and says that he used to call him by Hal, and when Batman motions him to leave, Hal turns on the pressure and says he doesn't even know this guy. And Batman, clearly still affected by Hal's actions as Parallax, tells him that since he wanted to put that ring back on and play superhero, he's giving him this chance with this case. Hal claps back by saying that he's not Robin or a member of the Justice League, he's a Green Lantern. And as soon as Hal goes to grab his shoulder, boom, Batman gives Hal a stern left to the face and says that they're even. As they both get into the Batmobile, and Green Lantern asks if the seat moves back, with Batman responding saying that Robin usually sits there. And Green Lantern, still thinking Dick Grayson is Robin, he says he thought his sidekick was taller. As we all know at this point in the timeline, Tim Drake is about 15 or 16, which would account for the seat being slid in so much. Batman tells him to buckle up because the car will reach speeds topping 130, but Hal says the ring is all the safety that he needs, to which Batman speeds up, making Hal smash his face through the window. Hal then asks why they're even driving when he could fly them there in half the time, which Batman brings up a solid point and says that he glows and they would see him coming from a mile away. Hal then says that's how he wants it, that way they charge at him instead of anyone else. Batman tells him to dim it down, and Hal says that in his opinion it's easier to draw them out than hunting them, which Batman says not if you have patience, and asks him if he's put any thought into how he's gonna bring down the Tattooed Man, to which Hal says he's gonna hit him really hard with a big green boxing glove. Batman glares at him, to which Hal quickly backtracks and says he's kidding. Batman says that one of his tattoos tore apart a skyscraper in New York City, and another ripped a subway car right off the ground, showing how powerful these things really are. He says that they need a strategy so that no buildings are taken down in Gotham, so they're gonna need to think of a plan together, or not. Because right after he gives Hal this entire layout, we get straight into the next panel where we see the tattooed man giving himself a new tattoo while he's on a phone call with Tobias Whale, who, if you all remember, is the man who gave him the job in Gotham, as he tells him the job's done, and he has his next target, Harvey Dent, as he tells Tobias that he doesn't need anything on him because Harvey's already done plenty bad before his surgery back in the Batman Hush storyline. But before he could take another breath, a bright green light fills the room as we hear a voice call out to the tattooed man, yelling out his name, and as he opens the blinds, we obviously see the Green Lantern floating outside his motel room with, funnily enough, a bunch of Green Lantern signals pointing straight onto his building as he tells him to come out with his hands up to save himself some trouble. But of course, without hesitation, the tattooed man retaliates as he lets all of his tattoos onto Hal as he tells him he's not the one he expected. Green Lantern says that he thought the task was supposed to be tough and calls him a grunt and says that's probably all he's got. The tattooed man says that he sees his weakness, to which we get to such a cool panel as we see him letting out 2 more of his tats onto Green Lantern as he says the GL's weakness is arrogance, as we see Green Lantern get absolutely mauled by the monsters created by the tattooed man in the next couple of panels, as he tells Hal that the monsters sense great sin within him. Hal says him and the next guy, but the tattooed man says that Hal's sins are different. There's blood on his hands, a lot of blood, and his sins will be among his greatest designs, once he's dead of course, which is referencing back to Hal's days as Parallax. So it's a really good thing I briefed you guys up on this history at the beginning of the video before we got into this, because as you've seen throughout the story, there are a lot of references to that event. But of course, before the tattooed man can say another word, Batman appears right behind him saying boo, as he gets into an all-out brawl with the tattooed man himself while Hal fights off the actual tattoos. The tattooed man tells Batman that pain doesn't bother him. He's lived through months of torture by the Krill tribes of Mordora, and he was even welcomed in as one of their own, as they taught him the art of sin grafting, of burning sins onto his flesh. GL yells to Batman that any time would be good, as the man tells Batman he sees his sins too, and that he has so many. And after all that talk about not being bothered by pain, Batman apparently becomes Superman as he gets up and gives him a swift punch to the face, knocking him out instantly, which allows for all the tattoos to get reabsorbed into his body, as Hal flies back to him saying it was such a great plan that Hal took on the tattoos and Batman took on the man, in a sarcastic tone of course, as he says that he usually doesn't bleed this much on a team up, which ends the fight and takes us back to the Batcave, where we see Hal and Batman conversing as Hal tells Batman that he wants to show him something, and as he takes off his ring, Batman turns away from it, Hal asking if he's scared of a ring, as we see Hal offering Batman to try and wear the ring. Batman declines but eventually gives in and takes the ring from Hal and puts it on himself. It doesn't work initially, but Hal tells Batman to clear his head and picture something and says that him and Batman are different. They have something in common. They both watched something happen they couldn't stop, something they wanted to stop. She tells Batman that the ring helped them overcome his greatest fear, and it can help Batman overcome his too. Batman asks if he needs to think about that to work and calls it twisted, to which Hal says that you don't think about it, but in that split second you have to live with it, and tells him to remember why the Batman was born. And when he does that, only is when the ring starts to light up and take hold, as we see in such an amazing panel as the ring starts to activate with Batman. Hal urges Batman to take control of it and to put that horrible night in the alleyway behind him, and in that moment Batman does it. He manages to take control and with the ring creates the image that flows through his mind day in and day out, the only thing that he always sees, which is the memory of his parents, as we see him kneeling down, looking up at his parents, looking down at him. And in that moment he starts to approach them as if they were real, and the moment he tries to reach out at them, the image disappears, as he tells Hal he doesn't want to, not yet, and thanks him and says to him for the record he's glad he's back, and for the first time in the comic calls him Hal, as we see them rekindle the friendship and Green Lantern flying away. Which brings us to the end of the comic, which of course brings us to the end of the video. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, let me know in the comments below about what other comic stories you'd like to see on this channel, and hey, subscribe to the channel too if you haven't already, because I have tons of stories on this channel for you to enjoy, and I post videos just like this one every single week, so turn on that notification bell to keep up with my weekly upload. Click on the bat symbol to check out last week's video, and click onto the video to the right of that to check out the video I think you'll like my channel, because if you like this one, you'll definitely like that video. Hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you all next week with another video. Peace!